Okay, hi, that's great. So thanks everybody. My name is Scott Smallwood. Please let me know if you're not hearing me because I can't see you all at this point, but hopefully everyone can hear me okay. My name is Scott Smallwood. I'm a professor of music composition and technology at the University of Alberta, where I also serve as the director of the Sound Studies Institute. My pronouns are he, him. I want to mention that I'm giving this presentation on behalf of Marilene Oliver, who was originally going to be presenting today as the lead artist on this project, but the airlines had other plans for her, as I'm sure they have for so many people these days. So I'm here giving the presentation on her behalf, but I'm part of the project, so I know some things about it, so I'll do my best to do this, but it was a little bit of a sudden change. This project is a project that was largely conceived in Amsquaji, Westcahagan, which is otherwise known as Edmonton, Alberta. That's the Cree word for this area of Canada. Edmonton is actually on Treaty 6 territory, which is the traditional gathering place for diverse Indigenous folks, including the Cree and the Blackfoot primarily, but also the Métis, the Nakota Sioux, Iroquois, Dene, Ojibwe, Saulteaux, and Anishinaabe, as well as Inuit people, and many others whose histories and languages influence us here. So I'm really happy to be presenting this project. This project is called My Data Body. It is a virtual VR piece by Marilene Oliver, who's the lead artist, and several of us, in this case, myself, Stephan and J.R. Carpenter, worked on this project. I want to let you know also that this is part of a larger series of projects we call Know Thyself as a Virtual Reality, or KTVR for short. The goal of KTVR is to bring together researchers across our university and also beyond, and artists as well, to think about the aesthetics and the ethics of working with personal data to create artworks, and in particular VR artworks. So here, oh, I'm moving I just remembered now that I'm actually moving the screen, the slides. Okay, so what you see here are the names of the larger team associated with this project. The project actually began with a series of interdisciplinary presentations by members on the team, which led to the development of a database of technical resources, a set of ethics guidelines, and finally a series of collaborative artworks, which are in development now, and made by members of the team and also invited artists. And I want to say there is a website associated with the whole project, and I'll put that in the notes as soon as I finish talking here. Okay, next slide. Sorry, I have to move the slides on 2 machines. Okay, so here you see kind of an overview of part of the image of the body here. One of the main focuses of the Know Thyself project as a whole is creating 2 major VR artworks that make use of medical data. One of them, which is the one I'm going to be focusing on today, is called My Data Body, which focuses on the data of a single individual, that is Marilene Oliver. And Your Data Body, which is another project that I won't be discussing today, but is also in development. And this project focuses on working with data by other people. For all of these projects, medical scan data sets are the foundational components or inspirations, if you will, for the project, representing the prone, passive, obedient human body at an intimate cellular level. These resulting data sets have been translated into high-resolution volume renderings that in VR can be weightlessly held, penetrated, and explored by the user. My Data Body brings together several different forms of personal data, such as medical scans, social media data, biometric data, banking data, health data, and lots of other kinds of data. All of this is in an attempt to make visible and manipulable and audible our many intersecting data corpuses, where in VR they can be held and inspected and dissected, as I mentioned before, and reconfigured even. So you can kind of think about this project as a sort of data processing site, if you will, for all of Marilyn Oliver's data, where it can sort of be pulled apart and recomposed. Okay, so here we see, oh, I think this is actually the video. Let me just, yeah. So I'm gonna just play you, hopefully this will come across well over Zoom. This is a 3-minute video that shows kind of an overview. Hopefully you can hear the sound. So you can see that the body shroud contains lots and lots of objects inside, which I'll talk about throughout this presentation.
Becoming a body of evidence.
So right now the user is pulling some of the components out of the body. We'll talk about those components in a little bit. Okay, cool. So so that's just a little bit of an overview of what it's like to be in the project. Obviously, that's a flat screen version of that. So here, this is a nice view of kind of like or a screenshot of what you see when you first come into the project. Here we see the magnetic resonance scanned image body of artist Marilyn Oliver floating prone within a cloud of text data from her Facebook feed. And kind of as an echo to the historical anatomical public dissections, we decided to put in these masks, these faces surrounding the body that are kind of observing her. And these faces are actually also taken from Marilyn's data. These are actual facial scans of her face in various emotional expressions that were captured with her iPhone. Here we see from the top view, we see some of the retinal scans, the cross-section slices, which I'll talk about. Bones and organs are inside, and other objects inside this kind of semi-transparent shroud, which comes from the MRI scan. And inside of the semi-transparent slices themselves, there's another data corpus downloaded from social media platforms that are plotted into various parts of the textures in the body, in the slices, and I'll show you those as well. So here's an example of one of those. This is a cross section of the torso, and you can kind of see the arms above there as well. And this is like a horizontal or axial slice, essentially. And in the data that has been incorporated into this is from Macintosh activity monitor data from her computer, one of her computers. That's plotted into the bone areas of this. Google data into the muscle, and Facebook data into the fat. And you can actually read that. You can pull these out, and they all have text you can read, and you can sort of turn the thing around and stuff. And there's also some vertical or coronal plane slices in the project as well, which have data usage agreement text plotted into them. There are many other slices that we actually didn't end up using. There's lots of them, but the body has quite a few. So here this is a little bit hard to see with this image, but you can see these sort of purple and blue squiggles inside the body. And unfortunately, they're really hard to see. You might have been able to see them a little bit better in the video, but these are actually the veins and arteries throughout the body on which we've mapped text, basically passwords and logins flow back and forth. So you can actually read her passwords and her logins flowing through her arteries, which is pretty fun. And then there are various other objects, as I mentioned. There are organs that will make sounds when you pull them out, and they also shed things from them. So for example, you noticed in the video, the heart, when you turned it upside down, started dropping emojis. You can hear her heartbeat in the heart. All of the objects, when you pull them out of the body, they make sound. So, and I'll talk more about that. But there's also lots of organs, lots of slices, lots of bones. All of these things can be pulled out, and they all have various features. So as seen in the video, the scan data, the organs, the bones, the cross sections, all of those things can be extracted from the body individually. And that's where the soundscape comes in. So the primary sound you hear when you go into the project is a drone that was created by a series of very large prayer bowls that Marilene used in a performance piece where she actually centered them on the chakras of her body and then caused them to ring. So I actually used those same bowls to create a kind of internal drone that is located in the chakra points on her shroud. And that's the primary sound you hear in the piece, other than the text that's coming from the masks. But as you start to pull things out of the body, all of those objects contribute to the soundscape in various ways. They contain recordings of biometric, basically digital recordings of her voice reading a lot of this text, her heartbeat, and other kind of textural sounds, gurgling, eating, biting, squelching, and other kinds of sounds. You can, as you pull these things out, you can kind of compose your own little sound worlds with some of these things. So let me go to the next slide. So here's an example of that. These are all the bones in the body that have been pulled out and piled in a heap. So the skeleton actually has a composition that's attached to it. Stephan Moore and I made the sound for this piece, and we actually created some pieces in our normal performance mode using sounds from this project. And then we chopped them up and made them jittery, so that if you want to hear it all as one piece, you actually have to pile all the bones together and then center your head inside of the bones, and then you hear the piece come together, as opposed to sort of the individual bones. If you only hear one at a time, you're only hearing a portion of the piece kind of being cut up. So you heard a little bit of that in the video, that kind of, that's just the piece that's been chopped up. And so the only way to hear the piece in the whole is to pull all the bones together. It's a little bit of a gamification kind of Easter egg kind of idea here. Here also is the rib cage that contains some poetic text. So J.R. Carpenter contributed to this project, poetic text. And the bones all have sort of poems associated with them. And so as you take the bones out of the body, these things kind of hang off of it, and you can sort of turn the bones around and read the text. So for example, this rib cage, the text here is, "I dream I hear a body sleeping in a bedside beside me, but it's only the wind, big ribs rising and falling. It's only the house breathing through its nose." Here are the retinal scans. So these also have text on them. I cannot imagine a mark on my body any deeper than the memory of text burned into my retina, left smoldering in my brain. So these are, you can kind of flip these over with your hand in the project. And they also ring little bells when you hit them. This is also a nice way of seeing the arteries I mentioned before. You can see those a little bit more clearly, the passwords moving through this particular part of the project. In addition to the text and the blue and purple arteries, there's also some other text that flows through the body, also based on Carpenter's poetry. And for this, we used the Unity particle system. It was basically the poetic text streams through the body in 4 different parts. And it's done in such a way that it sort of creates this free verse poetry. And depending on your orientation as you're viewing the words flow by, you can kind of reorient or reorder them in your mind. And it's sort of a fun kind of, I don't know, a way of adding a little bit of sort of poetic text to the more cold nature of the data text in the project. Here's sort of a close-up.
2 minutes left,
some of that
Scott,
text.
of your presentation. Sorry to talk over you. I'm giving you a 2 minutes left.
Yep, we're almost there. That's good. We're
Thank you.
just
Love
very
it.
close to the end. This is actually the last slide. So, so thanks for that. Yeah, so what this shows, the project is presented normally in an installation context in a gallery. So here you can kind of see a rendering of what that would look like. The idea here is to create an environment that's inspired by the VR project, but more saccharine. So everything's in black and white. And so it makes it much more impactful when you actually put on the headset. The computer is actually installed inside of these 3 sculptures that you see in the background. Those sculptures are actually made of laser cut chloroplast generated from the MRI scans themselves. So those are actually sort of her body MRI scans just coming from the same data that you see inside the project. And there's a projection of text on top of those. And then on either side, those are actual prints, high resolution prints. So you can read the text without going into the project if you want some of the text. Yeah, and this is just a close-up of one of the prints that installs on the wall. So thanks very much. This is, again, a collaboration between myself, Marilene Oliver, Stephan Moore, and J.R. Carpenter. It's part of a much larger project. We had a lot of help here, and here's some thanks to those people. And I'm happy to answer questions if you have them. Thanks.
I think everybody is really fascinated by the project, and there's been a couple of really nice comments come in on the chat as well that I've seen pop up. Does anyone have any questions in the room, Terry?
I'm going to ask.
Do that. No, you need to do it. You need to speak into this microphone.
Scott, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, I was muted. Yes, I can hear you, and I also just put a link.
Thank you. I've tested. Obviously, unmuting caused chaos. Yes. But talking to you through the microphone is absolutely fine. It was an intriguing project. Thanks very much. Could you? I know the relationship of the words to the images was not in the slightest bit arbitrary. It all had an inevitable look to it. But how did they get there in exactly the way that you portrayed them?
Right. You mean sort of technically, how did we get the words into various?
Visually and yes, technologically, if you wish.
Yeah. So because I'm a sound person, I don't know very much about how the images were made. I know, for example, that the text slices, those would have been probably sort of individually created inside. So let me back up. The MRI scan also contains vertical and coronal and sagittal slices that show you essentially I guess it's oxygen or like whatever the sort of cellular color is of the various things. So you can kind of see the layers of fat and muscle and bone in those cross sections. So those are actual scans. And what we did is we replaced figuring out what the colors were. We actually plotted the text as little sort of like to sort of follow around those textures. That probably was done in Illustrator or Photoshop or something. I don't actually know because I didn't do that part of the
So
project.
your word expert, your poet, actually created the words to those shapes, is that right?
Yeah, so that's a good question. There's so much text in this, and it's from a lot of different places. So some of the text is poetic text. That's mostly the text that flows through the body. Also, some of the text on the masks, I think, also come from the poetry. And the other text is all from data from her Facebook feed, from Google, from her computer and various things. So she's sort of like grabbed a lot, just massive amounts of data and thrown it in there.
I'm sure you needed twice as long. Thanks very much.
Thank you. I just have one more question in the room.
Hello, if you're a sound designer, I would pose you a sound question. Now you said the text is flowing and the camera movement was also flowing. It was also very smooth, but the music was staggered, like rhythmic and sort of pulsing. And what is the reason for that deviance between rhythmic music and flowing, smooth movements?
You just
Sorry, I just realized I was muted. Yeah, so there's so many different aspects. There's I would say there's kind of three varieties of sound in this. There's the drone, and that drone is very much being synthesized in real time. So and it's also very, very spread out in terms of where the various components come from. So it's very 3D-ish, right? When you're actually in the project. Then there are texts, a lot of the sounds are based on readings of the text that have been sort of cyberized, if you will, or sort of like we used vocoder techniques and other kinds of ways to pitchify them and make them sound a little bit sort of robotic. And then there are some rhythmic sounds. So yeah, it's a good question. Those slices that are in there, they have such a kind of visual rhythm to them that we decided to on those, when you pull those out, those do actually have little rhythms associated with them. And if you hold them up to your ear, you'll hear these little sort of looping rhythms that are based on scratching sounds on wood and tapping on wood. And that was just sort of to kind of give a visual corollary to the nature of the way that they're sort of like, put into the body. And they also, as you move them away, the further away from the body they go, the tempo of all of them actually gets slower and slower and slower. So they're very, very much connected to how they were pulled out and where they were pulled out. I don't know. I hope that that's a quick answer. I could talk about the sound for hours, but I know we don't have that much time.